Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I am your host, MGCovers. This is episode 44. Happy Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. We had a lot of fun, exciting NFL playoff football. My Washington Commanders, not Redskins, Commanders, actually won a playoff game, which was incredible. As huge dogs absolutely destroyed Detroit and will play in the NFC Championship for the first time since 1991. That is wild. It's hard to believe. So, yeah, when I was a kid, we had a ton of success. I remember watching the Super Bowl with my mom when I was in high school, and then watching us win 3 Super Bowls. It just felt like normal part of our culture. And then as an adult, I saw this franchise, struggle. So this is basically the first time they played the NFC Championship game since I was in college. So I'm super excited. I think they have a shot against the Eagles. I really do. They opened up as plus 5.5 dogs, which we'll talk about this in the podcast today, that all these playoff games are 50-50 games, but super excited about that. So let's go ahead and give you the outline for today's podcast. We're going to review our wagers for this past week. We're going to do a Twitter reaction / educational teaching moment. And of course, we'll dive deeper into the NFL playoffs. And then we launched our new stat model coaching program today, and we'll talk about that to round out the podcast. Okay, so let's dive into last week's wagers. We had a winning week last week, really solid week. You can see there year to date, we are now at 2.65 units. We were in the hole, I think, minus 5.5, something like that. So roughly a 7-unit gain in 1 week. And NCAA basketball is leading the way. We didn't place any NHL or NBA wagers this week, so it was all NCAA basketball. I want to dive into that and show you the log. We had a huge run in NCAA basketball. So on Monday, we split out, and then we started this big run. Had Ole Miss at plus 550. They won. Then followed that up the next night. George Mason hit another huge dog, 290. And that's 8 units just in those 2 plays. And so you'll see a ton of college basketball is a very beatable market, and you will have tons of opportunities to cash money line dogs. And this is really the first time I pursued college basketball hard, probably in the last, 2 or 3 years. And this is a new model, and having a ton of success with it. So super excited to dive back into college basketball. And then we went on a 4-0 run, had a 4-0 night there in 116, and then hit VCU the next day. And then, of course, like always, taught you guys about regression. After a huge run, it will regress. Went on a 7-0 run, and then Saturday went 0-3. Figured we'd hit one of those. Ole Miss, New Mexico State. I think Ole Miss went to overtime against Mississippi State and lost. But still, all those, I'm still pleased with that. Those were good wagers nonetheless. Houston, one of the best teams in college basketball, struggled Central Florida on the road. But anyway, really solid run there, and that gets us to, for college basketball, 27-25. That's 52% win percentage, but up plus 9.06 units. And we are on a really good pace, 2.65 units. And I'll show you this. I don't think I've ever covered this before, but you can calculate your pace numbers. Very simple. So we're at 2.65 units. You take 2.65 units divided by the day of the year. This is the 20th day of the year. You have to find something called the Julian calendar if you want to do this year round. So we made 2.65 units in 20 days. So that means we're averaging 0.13 units per day. So then you take 0.13 units per day times 365, and we're on pace for 48.36 units, which we hit 47 last year. So we're on really good pace, right in line to where we need to be. And again, that was one of my goals for January, is just starting out the year, especially January, positive. So we accomplished that. Now, I do want to take a peek at the, even though we didn't wager NBA model, I want to share this. I made a video earlier in the week about this, but I had a client email me late last night. I didn't even realize this. This is our NBA margin video. margin model. And we made changes right here in 1-3 where we played double-digit favorites via the model with value. And since then, had a 2-0 night last night. It's gone 18-12. Guys, that's 60%. And I can't ever remember, maybe in my career, creating an NBA model that was hitting 60%. Now, granted, it's only 30 wagers, so that's, relatively smaller sample size. We need to get it to 50. But as far as anything I've created NBA-wise, this is by far the best. And granted, it doesn't cash as many dogs, but again, by playing those, quote, top teams, in this case, double-digit favorites, definitely increases the accuracy. And a little free play for tonight, look down there, the only one that qualifies as a play is Chicago LA Clippers. And I think that line for Clippers might be like we'll check it real quick, -5. So our line is -19. And it is, -5. So a lot of value there with the Clippers. And then we'll slide over here and take a peek at the NHL model. It has gone 19-10 since we made the changes. And what I did was I just took my old model and we're just playing the top 10 teams via the old model. Had 2 losing days, 117, 118, no plays via yesterday, but still well over 60% at 19-10. So excited to continue to track this as well. Okay, next I want to dive into, let's talk about the NFL playoffs over the weekend. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, you already saw me rant about this, but I think this is worthy of a deep dive explanation. Wild card. Whoops, I'm behind the week division. All right, everybody was playing on Saturday, KC and Detroit in a teaser. And I think the majority of books, liability, well, depending on it, I think some books may have had, Houston may have been a liability. You look at, this is a bookmakers review. They had 58% of the tickets on Houston for that specific game. And you can see there's 61% on Washington, but the majority of books were taking a ton of teaser action. So if Washington or Houston, covered that teaser number, it was a loss. It was a huge day for the books. In fact, Dave Mason at Bet Online actually sent me a tweet. I tweeted at him, and he tweeted back, said it was a whopper day for the books. So they absolutely destroyed. And the important point to make about that, and if you're not familiar, Wong teasers are basically when you take a line that's anywhere from 7.5 to 8.5, and you minus 6 points, so you take it down to where it would cover the field goal and the touchdown. So if that team wins by at least, a field goal, your wager would cash. And you have to win both of them. And everybody was playing those teasers. And the problem with that, like I've said a gazillion times in this business, if you do what everybody else does, considering the majority of people lose money in this long term, it's just not the side you want to be on. And playoffs are very difficult to handicap. And I think what led to a lot of this, quote, rookie mistakes, favorites were cashing at a very high percentage. I tweeted this out on Instagram. I didn't even realize this. Underdogs won outright in NFL this year 28% of the time. Dogs cash in NHL 40%, and MLB 40%, NBA 30%. And usually that number is way significantly higher. But NFL 28% dogs won outright. So it was a, quote, favorite year, so to speak. And I think a lot of people thought that would translate into NFL, but it did not. And this is the reason why I don't wager on playoffs. It's very difficult to handicap, but let's just look at this from a very basic level. All these teams are in the playoffs. So in order to get into the playoffs, you have to be a, quote, good team. So if all of these teams are good that's in the playoffs, what does that translate into based on how I teach? It's a 50-50 game. Meaning, statistically speaking, each team has basically a 50% chance of winning these games, irregardless of the line. Now, if you're listening and saying, I don't know if I believe that, MG, well, let's look at it. So yesterday, Philadelphia won. They did not cover. They were the favorite, so they won. Buffalo was the underdog. They won and covered. Then on Saturday, Kansas City was the favorite. They won but did not cover. And then you had Washington was +8. They won and covered. Now we go to so we had 4 games. The dog won how many times? Twice. 50%. Okay. Now let's go back to the entire playoff schedule. Rams, Minnesota. Rams was an underdog. They won. Buffalo was a favorite. They won. Philadelphia was a favorite. They won. Washington, when they played Tampa Bay, was an underdog. They win and cover. Houston against the Chargers on January the 11th. They win and cover. Baltimore was a favorite and they won. So let's see how many dogs won when you add all this up. I think that's 10 games total, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep. So you had Rams won. There's 1 dog. Washington, there's 2. Houston, there's 3. Buffalo is going to be 5. And then Washington is going to be 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we had 10 games in the NFL in the playoffs. The underdog wins outright 60%. So that if you want to get better at this business, write this down. All playoff games, for the most part, are 50-50 games, whether it's NBA, college football, probably some variance in college football because of the way they've structured these playoffs. But now, definitely, like tonight's Ohio State Notre Dame game, 50-50 game. So a good lesson to be learned there is that just because what you see happening in the regular season with all these favorites cashing, that doesn't mean that translates or transfers into the playoffs when all of these teams are, quote, good. All right. And to go along with that point, we'll dive into this Twitter reaction I saw, and I posted this on Instagram as well. So don't forget to follow me on Instagram. I give out a ton of content. It's MGCovers, cover spelled with the Z. There's a link to follow me in the description of this video. This is from Jared Smith, who is not a professional sports handicapper, and I'm not throwing shade on him. I'm just reading his tweet, but his bio says media personality. It says Chiefs -8.5 was available pretty much the entire week until this morning. If you waited until today to bet Chiefs -9.5 and lost on a fluke, intentional safety, you have nobody to blame but yourself. So he's insinuating that you should play early and you would have gotten a better line. So now we're going to go back and look at how many times the line actually came into play for all of the playoffs. Because if you're new to this podcast, I'm an advocate of waiting late to play because there's far more advantages because you can actually read that line movement than there are to playing early. And I'm not going to pull this up, but I think earlier in the week, I think this is the night we played VCU. VCU line opened at 3.5. We played it basically 10 minutes before tip-off. Line moved to 4.5. We played it. There was a Buffalo NHL game. I think the line was -30 Buffalo at one point early in the day. It went all the way down to like -107. So we avoided that. Buffalo did lose. VCU won. So the advantages of waiting late is you get to see the entire line movement. It accounts for injuries, like tonight's national championship game. Maybe, something happens, something fluke. Quarterback falls down the stairs and injures his foot and is not able to play tonight. I mean, highly unlikely that something that crazy will happen, but it does happen. And just far more advantages to waiting late because you can see the line movement. You get to see the late line move if there's any sharps that attack the game late. So when we go back into NFL football, we're going to look at teams that won and covered and we'll count that. So we know we're dealing with 10 games here. Rams win and cover. Buffalo wins and covers. Philadelphia wins and covers. Washington wins and covers. Houston wins and covers. And Baltimore wins and covers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 games. Team that wins and covers 6-0. So that means the line came into play on 0 of those games. The line did not matter in any of those games. The team that won covered, or the team that covered won outright in the case of a dog. And then Saturday, Kansas City, there was that fluke game, and that's a good point to make. That was basically a fluke safety. And if they hadn't had that safety, then Chiefs would have won and covered. But they did not. So there's one game. Washington wins and covers. Philadelphia won but did not cover. Buffalo was a dog. They won and covered. So we had 10 playoff games. In those 10 playoff games, the line only mattered in 2 games. And the application of this is if you can pick the winner in spread sports, that team is going to win roughly 80% of the time. So back to this original tweet here. This is a big mistake a lot of people make in the community, even people that are personalities. You cannot take a 1-game sample of something that happens and make that a fact about that sport. So in this case, yes, if you would have played early, you would have gotten a better line. But an overwhelming 80% of the time, the line just doesn't matter. I know you don't hear that often in the sports betting space, but all you have to do, I just showed it to you. And you can do it for NBA, you can do it for college basketball. It's a little bit less in college basketball. But nonetheless, the whole goal is not to beat the closing line. The goal is to pick the correct team. Because if you can pick the team to win, they're going to cover an overwhelming majority of the time. All right. And before we wrap this podcast up, don't forget, we have launched our stat model building program. A lot of changes to that. In the past, it was just one-on-one coaching with me. Now we actually have a video platform. We have 8 coaching videos that explain the basics. Some are advanced in how to build stat models. Also includes one-on-one coaching with me. If you're interested in getting more information about that, I don't publicly post anything about it. You have to sign up for the email list. There's a link in the description of this video if you want to do that. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in to the podcast, and we'll talk to you this week. Peace.